For today's review of The Mandalorian, I'm taking another look at Season 2, Episode 4, called The Siege. And back when this episode first aired, I remember that there were some mixed reactions. Some people really didn't like it or thought it was like fillery. I remember quite enjoying it. Of course, we'll see how I enjoy it today, but back then it was fine. So the Razor Crest is still an absolute mess, and therefore Din and Grogu are actually trying to fix it. And this opening sequence, I think, is a very good tone setter for the remainder of this episode, because it's cute, it's funny, and we have a lot of cute and funny moments throughout this episode. And I think Carl Weathers did a very good job directing it, actually. It's crazy to think that he directed this episode, also playing Greef Karga in the meantime in the episode, because I think he did a very good job with it, actually, considering this was the first thing he ever directed. Because, of course, this episode goes back to Nevarro, where we actually get introduced to the planet by seeing the Mandalorian hideout, where there are no more Mandalorians. There are just a bunch of thugs that get taken care of by Cara Dune, who's now the Marshal. So this very much indicates the change of the planet, how Nevarro has changed ever since the last time we were here. No more Mandalorians, thugs, Cara Dune is the Marshal taking care of these thugs, and of course the High Magistrate, Greef Karga, now. So there are some changes already going on. In Season 3 it's way different even. So it's cool to see how Nevarro actually is developing since Season 1. But Din returns with the Razor Crest. He greets Greef Karga and Cara Dune, and Greef is like, well, I'll put my best people on it. Best people. Greef, seriously? They might be Imperials, because these are people working for the Empire, as we see in the final scene of this episode. But that's getting ahead of myself a little bit. Greef should have screened everyone, made sure that everyone is okay, because yeah, he seemed to be a bit too trusting with this one. So Grogu is dropped off in a school where he becomes a little shit once again, but then again the kid next to him is also being a little shit, so it's fair that Grogu steals the cookies. It is funny that the cookies are real life cookies, but then again they do look kind of Star Warsy. But yeah, I can literally go to a local baker and see these cookies lying there, so that was funny. But then again, this episode is quite funny. It has a lot of funny moments, and the next moment as well with Mythrol, because we get to see Mythrol for the first time since the very first episode. He is apparently still around. One would assume that he was taken away or maybe killed, but no, he's actually out of the carbonite now. But what's funny is that the first time we see him, he has some kind of a reaction to Din. Now, the reaction that he has reminds me a lot of something in the Orville. If you haven't seen the Orville, you won't know what I'm talking about, but the very first scene, I believe, in the very first episode of the Orville, we see a character named Derulio, who actually comes back later in the show as well, and he has some kind of reaction. Of course, that reaction is very different from Mythrol here, I will say that, but I do think that there are similarities also because they're both blue characters. Yes, I am that simple sometimes, by the way, but I did think it was similar. Anyway, so they need Din to help raid an Imperial base that apparently is still on Nevarro, not safe. So Din is like, yeah, sure, I'll go with you. Now, this does seem like a bit of a side quest, but actually looking back at it now, the entire raiding of the Imperial base is quite important for the series going forward, because there are things being set up for the remainder of this season and also Season 3. So I do think, despite it being a little bit fillerish here and there, it still is an important episode, and I still think it did get some things done, in addition to it just, being fun. But yeah, once they're in the Imperial base, I think overall it's a fun action sequence, and sure, you can complain all you want about the regular guy standing there in the background with, a regular t-shirt. I honestly didn't really see him the first time or any of the other times that I watched this episode. It was only this time that I just watched the episode where I was like, okay, let's pause the moment that it's indicated when he's there. So yeah, okay, I saw him. Who cares? It's very brief, and I honestly, don't mind these mistakes. Star Wars has been making mistakes since the very first movie. If you go back to the very first movie, shall we remember this moment? Yeah, this happened. They went with it. They actually, in the special edition, added a sound effect to make it a part of the movie. So mistakes in shooting happen. If they end up in the final product, that happens sometimes. I actually embrace it, I actually find it enjoyable that there was a moment like this. And also, I've read that the character was taken out digitally in other released versions of the episode. I'm very lucky that I just have that original version that aired back in 2020 where I can actually see him, because I'm like, it's actually cool. It doesn't take me out of the episode. I actually just appreciate it, But when they're on the base, they find out the real reason that there's an Imperial base there and what Gideon was after, because he apparently wanted to clone Grogu, or at least some part of him. And now this actually teaches them that, first of all, Gideon is alive, which they didn't know up until this point. But second of all, that Grogu was needed for some weird-ass cloning experiments, which I honestly don't think anymore related to the clones that we saw in the sequel trilogy in terms of Snoke and Palpatine. Now, back in the day when this episode first aired, I did think that was related somehow, but nowadays I don't really think that anymore, considering that Gideon seems to have been using it for himself. It didn't really seem like he was using it for the Empire, because also there's a scene in the third season where it seems like Gideon is just doing his own thing, and the other Imperial remnant people are not too happy that he's just keeping to himself this much, and he's doing the cloning experiments himself. Now, of course, I'm not sure about any of this. This is merely speculation based on what I personally think. I would just love to have more gaps filled in between, Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. I think there's still a huge period that is yet to be explored, to be covered. Now, of course, The Mandalorian and all the shows around the Mandoverse are covering that. We're going to get more shows and series in this time period, but I would like, some kind of connecting element in terms of a book or a comic. If it's already out, please let me know in the comments, because I wouldn't know about it, and I've done my fair share of researching things that are taking place in this era, because I think it's an absolutely fascinating era. But anyway, once they start shooting their way out of the base, they have already taken care of the lava, and that will take care of the base. That's fine. They just need to get out of there. Again, I just think it's a fun action sequence where it very much clearly shows that the actors were instructed by Carl Weathers, have fun, just have a blast with the episode, have like a moment if you would. It's just fun. Din, of course, goes off towards the Razor Crest so that he can help out later in the sky. He also gets Grogu with that, and Grogu has his baby Groot moment. If people have seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, I thought that was actually a funny moment as well. So, again, just a fun and funny sequence that I enjoy. So, Din flies off after he saved the day with the Razor Crest, and then Cara and Greef get a visit from Carson Teva from the New Republic in terms of what happened. But this is where Cara gets offered to potentially work for the New Republic, which, well, we now know she takes, because that's a way of writing her out of the show. But it was funny, when this episode was made, they probably weren't even thinking about firing Gina Carano. I think that this very much helped making sure that they could fire her easily and write her out of the show in a pretty convincing and clever way. Nice little coincidence, I suppose. But then when you just think the episode is done, we get one more scene, which feels kind of like an end credit scene, but of course it isn't. It plays still before the credits. It's when we see Gideon's light cruiser. We get introduced, of course, to Katie O'Brien's character, the Dark Troopers there. All very important things that are important for the show going forward, not just this season, but also the next season. So I actually think this final scene right here is very good to have in this episode, so that we now as an audience know also the villains, the bad side of it, like what is going to come later in this season, because that's of course what we're building up towards, the big standoff on Gideon's light cruiser in the final episode. So actually looking back at this episode, it did a lot of important things in terms of setup, which I very much appreciate. So people may have complained about certain things back in the day, I get it, but looking back at it now, it's better than I remember even, and I already liked it before. So overall, I think this is a fun funny episode with actually some very good, important moments for the show going forward. So it's not just filler. Like, it might feel a little fillery, but overall it has some important things. So I think chapter 12 is a good episode. But of course, that is all that I can really say. What do you think about chapter 12 of The Mandalorian, The Siege? Do you like it? Is it better than you remember, or do you still not like it? Please let me know any and all thoughts in the comments below. Please subscribe to the channel for more Star Wars content, and of course, until the next time, may the Force be with you.